my name is Dawn, and I'm really sorry I couldn't be there with you today, but I'm actually in Montana for my brother's wedding. I actually have some really pretty mountain scenery that I tried to get as a backdrop for this little video, but unfortunately the lighting was really terrible, and so there's just a window behind my head. But you guys are going to be paying attention to the PowerPoint in a minute anyway. So my part of the presentation is Poe's The Raven, which was published on January 29th, 1845 in the New York Evening Mirror, and it's arguably Poe's most famous work. I mean, I think we've all heard of it at one time or another in our lives. I actually carved a pumpkin when I was in high school, and it had a raven and it said Nevermore across the top, and I thought it was really cool. Um, the Raven contains the theme of a suffering protagonist who's remembering a deceased woman, and this is a theme that we see a lot in Poe's work because another example is the poem Annabel Lee. So the writing style is called trochaic octameter, which has 8 stressed, unstressed, 2-syllable feet per line. It's really, really difficult to use consistently, so the fact that Poe is able to write such a long piece in this style is really a credit to what a great writer he is and what he could, just the magic he could do with words. The trochaic octameter, it lends itself to an internal rhyming scheme that Poe really takes advantage of, and by adding the shorter line at the end of each stanza, that it's not always this, but often it's quoth the raven nevermore. He really gives the poem a really beautiful lyrical quality when you read it aloud. He also takes advantage of the O sounds in the poem, like Lenore and Nevermore. He felt that this really underlined the melancholy of the poem and gave it an atmosphere of loneliness. So as far as the symbolism goes, the raven, I'm going to talk a little bit more about in the next slide, but he used the raven because he needed a non-reasoning creature to repeat the refrain nevermore as an answer to the narrator's questions, because the narrator is constantly saying, is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? And if Poe had used, say, a person, they would be able to answer logically, and then the whole sense of Gothic mystery would be completely lost. The raven was actually originally a parrot, but Poe changed it because ravens are a symbol of ill omens, they're black, and they're just all around more sinister. The bust of Pallas that the raven lands on, Pallas is the Roman name for Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom. And so it lends a sense of credibility to the raven's answers because he lands on it. It leads the narrator to believe that the raven spoke from wisdom, and it wasn't just a random coincidence. And Poe also liked the way that the word palace sounded. So the words midnight in the first stanza and December in the second, they both symbolize the end of something and the coming of change. And it can be interpreted as the last midnight in December, which is New Year's Eve, so it symbolizes, the end of a year, the coming of change, new things. Let's see. The chamber that the narrator is in symbolizes his love for Lenore. It's very beautiful. It's well furnished. It creates a sense of beauty, and it's just a memory of his love for her. And the storm outside is the narrator's loneliness, his internal turmoil, his longing for his lost love. So I did a little bit of research on ravens in lore, and Poe uses the raven to add a hint of the supernatural, but it's not actually a supernatural creature. And so we've got the narrator, who's possibly unreliable because he's obviously very distraught. He's talking to a bird, so we don't know if the raven is actually supernatural, if it's actually answering his questions, or if it's just a bird and he's going crazy. Black feathers are a universal sign of an ill omen, and the raven actually might also be a reference to Norse mythology. The god Odin had 2 ravens named Hugin and Munin, which means thought and memory. And so we see the narrator as a student. His thoughts follow Hugin, but then Munin interrupts with the memories of his lost love. The physical raven in the story would be Munin, because it's the memories that are coming back and kind of taking over and consuming his mind as this bird sits on the bust of Pallas. So this is a very Gothic poem. There's a lot of elements of Gothic literature. Poe liked to do less of a traditional focus, and he liked to go more deep into the psychology of the narrator descending into madness. As I said before, we don't actually know if this raven is speaking to him. We don't know if it's there. He could just be a guy going crazy, and he has all of these questions. He doesn't know if he's going to heaven, or if Lenore went to heaven, and if he's ever going to see Lenore again. So he's obviously very distraught, very sad, and it could just be his mind creating a complete new scenario just to answer these questions. The protagonist is isolated and alone, both in the physical and emotional sense. The setting is a lonely apartment with a dying fire. Very often in Gothic literature, we see very beautifully furnished, very grandiose houses. Last year, I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and the focal point of the story is this big house named Manderley. It's beautiful, but there's always a sense of loneliness and a sense it's just not everything's beautiful, everything's perfect, but it's just not right. And the night outside, it's a bleak summer night. Everything's raging. There's a storm, inner turmoil, things like that. The supernatural element, like I said before, is the raven. We still don't know if it's actually a supernatural being or if the narrator's just crazy. And death is huge in Gothic literature. We see it in every story. And Lenore has passed away, and the whole focal point of the story is that she's dead, and the narrator is missing her. He doesn't know whether he's gonna see her again, and so either something from the other side in the form of Raven comes to crush all of his hopes and dreams by telling him that he is going to see her nevermore, or he's very, very depressed and his imagination decides to crush his hopes and dreams by in the form of this bird saying nevermore. But that's about all I have, and I will pass off to the next person, and I will see you guys in class on Wednesday.